Welcome to this panel discussion on public-private partnerships, models that work. I realize that for many of you, I may be the one person on the stage that you don't recognize. I'm Archie Clutter. I'm Dean of the Agricultural Research Division and Director of the Agricultural Experiment Station at the University of Nebraska. And my charge is to facilitate the discussion today. And I'm blessed by a panel, as you can see, that represents a great diversity and a great deal of depth and experience in this area. So I'm going to turn this over to them pretty quickly, but I will give you a brief picture of my background so you get an idea of my perspective. I have an undergraduate degree in agricultural business from Iowa State University and then graduate degrees in quantitative genetics and animal breeding from the University of Nebraska. I spent 12 years on the faculty at Oklahoma State University in a teaching and research position in the animal science department there, and then left to join Monsanto in 2000 when they were building their animal genomics team. And I helped to lead the research and development associated with that team for the next 12 years. And then 2.5 years ago, took this administrative position at the University of Nebraska. So I've had the opportunity to come to the table from both sides, or sit on both sides of the table, if you will. As a faculty member at Oklahoma State, had the benefit of collaborations with breeding companies to help validate some of the marker technology that I was developing. At Monsanto, had the opportunity to develop and sustain some really valuable partnerships with universities in particular, and many of those were centered around graduate student training and postdoc training, and built from there. And then in this latest role, of course, we have faculty in our institute with valuable collaborations and projects with companies, other entities in plant sciences, and food processing, some on the stage, many in the room. We have what we call Nebraska Innovation Campus that's under construction and that will start to open this spring, that's aimed at housing interactions of the private sector with our university faculty, and also aimed at engaging students in that kind of environment. I've been reminded last week, and then certainly as I came here this week, of the variety of partnerships that are important to us. And increasingly for us, those partnerships include our partnerships with our stakeholders, with our farmer stakeholders. Through precision agriculture, we're increasingly engaged in collaborative research and partnerships with those stakeholders. I just went last week to break ground on a new, what we're calling an international wheat research center in the southwest corner of Nebraska, about 5 hours from our campus, but it fits a great location where we'll be able to do wheat research, and that donor is very engaged in the work that will go on there and is very supportive of our engagement with the private sector at that location. So we talk often about these partnerships at the university in terms of the need to create new sources of funding, and that's certainly true, that we need to be able to partner, we need to be able to leverage funds to support our research, but ultimately this is about a more effective translation and impact from our research. And all of these kinds of partnerships that we're thinking of here are essential to the kind of impact that we need to achieve. So it really is a pleasure and an honor for me to be able to do this. You can see my background's quite different than most of yours, and it's been great to be here this week, to be part of the celebration and to be part of what I can see as a great reunion or a collection of reunions. And it's great to have this panel here, so I am going to start to hand this off to them. And the format that we'll use is I'll do individual introductions, and then as I do that, we'll give each person a few minutes to hit on the essential points that they see in models that can work for partnerships. And we'll go through that sequence, so make notes, make mental notes, because then we want to engage you in the discussion. But we'll use that round of introductions and comments to set the stage. So with that in mind, Rollin Sears is a Syngenta Senior Fellow and in Senior Development Management for Syngenta. He leads research and development for cereals in North America. He earned his postgraduate degrees at Montana State University and Oregon State University. Before he joined Syngenta, he was professor at Kansas State University. He's received many awards from his peers and from stakeholders, and one in that category would be Kansas Farm Bureau's Distinguished Service to Agriculture Award. He's a fellow of both the American Society of Agronomy and the Crop Science Society of America. So Raleigh, welcome, and we welcome your comments.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be invited to participate. When we think of private-public partnerships within Syngenta, I think it's based a little bit, or quite a bit, I guess, on recognition of what we're good at internally. As a cereals group or as a crop group within Syngenta, and what we're not good at, and then a clear decision about what we would like to invest in those areas we feel like we're weak, and those areas we feel like we need to collaborate. On the collaboration and partnership side, I think there's some key things that we've relied on that has guided us in establishing these partnerships. One of them is relationship building, and to sound a little bit, I guess, a little bit flaky, from a relationship building, we use what I call the bloomer model, which is you build a relationship much like you would build a marriage. You have to start out and date, and you get to know your partner. And then you become engaged, and then finally you become married. But there's a relationship that you build and get to know one another, and you build trust. And I think that a key thing with a partnership is trust, not only around when the partnership is working really well, but also having trust in your partners when the relationship might not be working really well. From a Syngenta side, I think it's also really important that especially the intellectual property folks and the business folks understand what the term global good means. Because I think one of the key parts that has allowed Syngenta to be successful in partnerships is this topic of sharing, and sharing information, sharing germplasm. And I've long been a proponent that we should treat germplasm the same way that readers treat books, that the genes are analogous to words in a book, and those genes should be open to be used and rewritten by other authors or by other breeders and geneticists to create new products. And so I think that sharing is a really, really strong component of a strong relationship and partnership. And certainly we're challenged as we move forward. I mean, we've heard lots of comments about more for less and harder problems to solve, more difficult challenges in the future. And so I think that the realization that we need to work together as a community is more important than ever. And sharing information in that regard is a critical part of the partnership.
Thanks, Raleigh. Steve Visscher. Steve is Deputy Chief Executive and Chief Operating Officer for the Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council. He's held that role since 2008. He's served in a range of important roles for BBSRC since it was formed in 1994. He's actively involved in food security research, coordination and strategy, and in development of research and innovation campuses that are designed to bring industry and researchers closer together. He's chair of the interim board of the International Wheat Yield Partnership, and he chairs the institution's coordination committee of the International Wheat Initiative. Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Well, it's a pleasure to be here to have this opportunity to share a few thoughts. And what I'd like to do is to just give a few general comments and then to outline one example of a public-private partnership model that we've used within my organization. I think I would just observe to start with that public-private partnerships take place at multiple levels. And Archie has just mentioned the wheat initiative. That is a global public-private partnership bringing together different parts to try and reach agreement on policies and priorities and to stimulate good activities. So, and then of course there are national and institutional examples. So I'm going to move more to a national example in terms of what I will talk about, but just present it in the context in the UK of agricultural strategy, an agricultural technology strategy has now been put in place on a national level, and it's the first time that we've had such a strategy for many, many years, and it highlights the recognition of agriculture and important topics around areas such as wheat. So that is bringing a greater trend to an encouragement for more public-private partnerships, and clearly new models need to be developed. So I think at the start of establishing a public-private partnership, everybody thinks that this will be good and there must be benefits from this, but we have to recognize some of the underlying realities that there will be perceptions on both sides about the motives and incentives of the different parties. And I think it's very helpful to have an honest and open discussion about those up front. There's also often the question of hidden costs. It's one thing to talk about the specifics, but servicing such an arrangement and having collaborations is quite heavy in terms of interactions from many people. And at the moment, I think we need more creative mechanisms to address these sorts of issues. So I'm just going to say a few words about research and technology clubs, which is a mechanism developed by the BBSRC to bring together organizations and researchers that we fund with industry. And the key features of these are as follows. We wish to see the potential for high quality research. There is generally a focus on pre-competitive areas so that there is less concern about intellectual property at that stage. We develop focused, or would look for the opportunity for focused calls for collaborative R&D, and so that there is a specific focus to that. In terms of sharing between the parties, we establish a joint funding pot of cash, and the BBSRC would typically put in the large proportion of that, even 80 or 90%. But with that 80 or 90% of equity, if you like, the BBSRC is not driving this. We are looking to facilitate the industry and the academics to take part and to drive this agenda. So we established a steering group with nominations. We have 6 nominations from the major funder and 6 nominations from industrial partners. And if we have more than 6 partners, there's an election between the partners to decide on who should take place. And so the private partners are very much involved in driving the agenda. They're involved in helping to assess the proposals that come in for funding. They have access to, early access to the results emerging from these programs. And they come into the club, as we call it, with the knowledge that intellectual property rights, if there are any that emerge, will rest with the grantee. We appoint an external coordinator, somebody who is expert in bringing together the parties, and that is a pretty critical element of working between all the parties. So what comes out of this? We require a 6-monthly dissemination of results to bring together the parties. There's an annual report, and one of the key events of this is a dissemination meetings at the 6 monthly disseminations. Not only is that a feedback of the results between the research projects and providers, but by bringing together the representatives of the companies, it often sparks new interactions, both on a private sector basis as well as a public-private basis. So that's just a model, and there's one of these is in crop research improvements, and we have around about 14 members of that, which include the companies who are represented here today, both large and small. So finally, I'd just like to end with a little trailer for tomorrow, which is that roughly at this time tomorrow we'll be talking about the International Wheat Yield Partnership and the launch of that. And just to say that is a public-private partnership as well, and we will say more about that tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Maryann Benzinger is Deputy Director General for Research and Partnerships at CIMMYT. She has a PhD in plant physiology from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology and began to work at CIMMYT as a postdoc to develop maize varieties tolerant to drought and low soil fertility. She's been based for CIMMYT in Zimbabwe and Nairobi as maize program director. She's held her current role since 2009, in which she helps develop and manage partnerships around the world. Marianne?
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. Let's have a look. Who is here from the private sector? If you could just hold up your hand. Well, that's quite a substantive number. Good. Well, my first experience with public-private partnership was in '97, when I went to Zimbabwe and studied the drought breeding program in maize, and I brought together private sector, public sector, NARS, and said, well, how can we collaborate on developing these varieties and getting them to the field, to farmers' fields faster? That was a start of a 2-day discussion, and there was one participant from NARS, who is, by the way, in the meantime, a CIMMYT staff, who put his hands together like this and said, we will not collaborate. And that, of course, killed the whole discussions very effectively. But in the meantime, fortunately, we have progressed a long way from there. And today we have a very strong partnership network with all the major NARS in maize research and 111 seed companies in Africa that form a fairly effective network that not only develops releases but brings the seed to farmers, many of them who haven't had access to seed before. So I think an important point is, as a public sector, don't compete with the private sector. If there is a competitive private sector, we should enhance and encourage it, and we should focus on where the private sector isn't. And there is a lot of research area in wheat where the private sector isn't. From CIMMYT side, we have very many active public-private partnerships. I think one expression of that is that we have, I'm overseeing 4 IP, intellectual property managers, lawyers. Never thought that I would get into that area, but it's an expression of lots of collaboration, not only with the public, but also with the private sector. One important area is upstream genomics, marker technology. It's such a rapidly evolving field. There is lots of experience in the private sector, and we exchange with them. So we have collaborative projects with all major multinationals, and that has, I think, benefited both sides in terms of seeing what works and what doesn't. And why should we repeat the mistakes that others have done? We can together move forward jointly. And particularly given that the public sector is not a competitor to the private sector, it really facilitates these kinds of collaboration. All our molecular, or most of our genotyping is done outsourced. Even though CIMMYT has the largest wheat breeding program worldwide and a very substantive maize breeding program, it's not economically sustainable for us to change genomic technology every 3 years. So we outsource it. We go and get the data, and we have our people focusing on processing that data. It's another type of public-private partnership. Similarly, we shop in transgenics. You can develop thousands of transgenics. Very few, less than 1 in 10,000, will ever make it to the field. Why? Because once you put them into an elite cultivar, they are often not effective, or you may have regulatory constraints. As an individual institution, you can never go through all those possibilities. Well, you may pursue a very good lead, and that be so good, but for us in our situations, we at this stage have been very strongly looking out at what can we bring in from the private sector that's tested and proven, and adapt to the farmers that need them in poorer parts of the world. I think Usha hopefully will tell us more what we could do in the wheat area of getting more wheat companies into wheat seed business. It's a difficult business. Farmers can recycle the seed. And on the other hand, it means if they only replace seed once every 10 years, it's not really profitable for the wheat seed sector to be there. It's one reason why CIMMYT has established public-private partnerships on developing hybrid technology for wheat. Now, some of the general public would say, so you want to make them dependent onto the private sector. Well, just look at what has happened in maize and in wheat. In maize, due to the heavy private sector engagement, there is a several times larger investment in research on maize than in wheat. And as a result, it's surely one of the results why productivity increase in maize are substantially larger, greater than they are in wheat. So if we are able to attract more private sector investment in wheat, it will be beneficial to the challenges that we as a world face. And it is not, and I think as well it then stimulates more information exchange. And an area that we are only exploring more recently is better collaboration with the processing sector. We talk about that we need to increase productivity. Well, we have several large-scale programs, for example, in South Asia, here in Mexico, where we work with several countries, their NARS extension programs, NGOs, to increase the productivity through improved agronomics, through improved cultivars, like the cereal sustainable intensification program for cereal systems in South Asia, or here the Masagro program in Mexico. But the moment you increase productivity, farmers ask, so where do I sell? And so to have an understanding, what does the processing need and where, it's not just that they need it, but where geographically, and what are the specs, may help to capture those productivity increases better, make it less of a frustration if the market is not there, if it gets produced. So that would be a couple of examples from our side.
Marianne. Usha Barwale holds a bachelor's degree from Wilson College at the University of Bombay and postgraduate degrees in agronomy from the University of Illinois. After Illinois, she was a geneticist at Purdue University studying sorghum and millet, and she's presently Joint Director of Research and Deputy Director of Biotechnology for Maharashtra Hybrid Seeds, and also Director of the Mahyco Research Foundation. Usha has had broad impact in a lot of ways, including through her membership on the board of directors at the Donald Danforth Center in St. Louis. Usha, welcome.
Thank you very much, Archie. Good evening, everyone. My public-private partnership perspective is going to be slightly different than what my colleagues here have shared. Mahyco actually came about as a result of a public-private partnership. So in our 50-year history, we've had many partnerships with multiple stakeholders. But the most important partnership for us is our partnership with our customer, who's the farmer. Every other partnership for a smaller organization like ours is only possible if we have a good partnership with the farmer, which makes other partnerships possible. This partnership is interesting because the partnership, we have a long-term partnership with the farmer, but the loyalty of the farmer is season to season, and unless we provide a value-added product, this partnership does not hold. And I think this value-added concept is something which is very critical as we look at, from, again, a smaller organization perspective, how we deal with public-private partnerships. When we talk about partnerships, we have many more examples of partnerships which are private-private partnerships, which could be licensing partnerships, research collaboration partnerships, sale of material partnerships, and all of these partnerships address very specific needs of the two partners. So the need could be, as indicated earlier by others, could be a gap which exists in our wheat portfolio. So if somebody else has a rust-resistant wheat variety which sells very well, then my company will be very interested in going and licensing that variety from and having a partnership. If the partnership allows reduction in time to get the product out to the market, then it's a partnership that, because of the future potential that the company would be interested in investing in. So for a smaller organization like ours, to get into a partnership, in some ways it's easy, but to bring resources to the table requires that we see some value in the future, which we can deliver to our farmers. So as we look at models for wheat, we really don't have that many strong partnership models in India, which have led to a product which we can deliver to the farmer. But we have such examples in case of rice. In case of rice, the Indian Agricultural Research Institute had a hybrid rice product for the North Zone, which no private sector had. And so multiple private sector companies created a partnership with IRI to bring those products to the market. And that is a win-win situation for both parties, and those are the kinds of partnerships which work. So when we think about a public-private partnership, which in some ways used to be easier 30 years ago than they are today, and possibly because of the IP issues, possibly because of the expectations from the public sector and the private sector have changed. But the critical factor is that the urgency and incentive is not always very clear in the partnership, which would be a key factor for making a public-private partnership successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Usha. Jim Peterson is a native of the Pacific Northwest. He has a bachelor's degree from Washington State and graduate degrees from the University of Nebraska. Until 1998, he was an agronomist and coordinator of the hard winter wheat regional nursery for USDA ARS in Lincoln. From 98 to 2010, he was professor of wheat breeding and genetics at Oregon State University, and he held the Cronstead Endowed Chair for Wheat Research. He also served as chair of the U.S. National Wheat Improvement Commission. He joined Limagrain Cereal Seeds as vice president for research in 2010, and he's responsible for research direction, collaboration, staffing, and implementation of new technology. Jim?
Thank you very much, Archie, for the chance to be here and participate with the group. As you can tell from my background, I'm coming to public-private partnerships from a long history on the public side. And it's an important part of how I've addressed and how we've tried to work with the universities in the last few years as we built a very new business unit in the United States. And I've looked at ways to work back with my colleagues on the public sector all over the country to find ways to collaborate, to complement our activities, and to deliver new technologies faster to the industry. But as you all recognize, there's lots of different forms of public-private partnerships. It can be as simple as a reciprocal germplasm exchange, as complicated as a collaborative breeding program, breeding projects. There's very specific basic research activities involved as well. And it is important for us to look for those opportunities to capitalize on the relative strengths and weaknesses, understanding the weaknesses of really of both parties as the opportunities exist. There's a lot of components to really making a public-private partnership work. Partly it's just the comfort level of the relative institutions of what you can do, how far can you go. You need to have both parties to recognize that we're in a new and evolving situation in the industry. This is not like it was 30 years ago. It's not like it's going to be 30 years from now either. It's going to take some common vision of both parties with an understanding of who the primary beneficiary is in the long term. The growers long term are the ones that we're all trying to help out and deliver product to. Many of the challenges that I've seen in just the last few years has been about managing expectations, both internally and in the institutions, understanding a realistic valuation of what each party brings to the table, a realistic expectation of what comes out of the partnership, and that's not always clear. And I think, as most of you recognize, valuing germplasm is not easy, and it becomes a very problematic proposition. Just keeping an alignment in institutions, keeping on message in institutions, getting grower support, the organizational support behind the institutions can be as important or more important than even the institutional support as well. Recognizing the limitations that both parties bring to the table. From the university side, the first question is always about liability. It's about managing intellectual property. And frankly, universities are pretty lousy at doing business. And that's part of the opportunity that we bring back to them, is finding ways to better commercialize and capitalize the products that are coming out of those. From the private side, there's no illusions. I mean, it's about return on investment. It's not just a charity program. It's finding ways to manage intellectual property and deliver a product and protect that product in the marketplace as well. So from my perspective, I mean, I'm looking at this as a very important component of what we're doing. Long-term commitment both in LCS and in the Limagrain group, and something that we think is critical to delivering new technologies to growers. But it's really critical that we're going to have to be creative, we're going to have to be flexible. There are no real true templates for public-private partnerships. They're all going to be different, they're all going to be managed differently, and it's important to just find ways to make it work. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting past the legalese, because it is important that we do this to facilitate exchanges and not to block them.
Thanks, Jim. Well, we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. I'm not sure, do we have anyone out with mics? Yeah, there they are. And also for the panel to perhaps respond to some of what they heard from other panel members. Is there anyone that's ready with a question? Here we go.
Hello. I guess a comment, and I suppose I'll direct the comment to Raleigh and our colleague formerly from Oregon. And that is that we all lived through, three Americans lived through an era when the private sector in wheat came into existence as a result of intellectual property law change, I think in 1972 perhaps. And I remember watching my own professors and other public sector people be very anti-private sector at the beginning of that, or in the middle of that era, and today there's a general partnership. In the developing world, there is, in many countries, there's still a great distrust by the public sector of the private sector's motivations. And I guess I wonder if one of you could comment on how that mistrust was overcome, because these, I'm thinking of breeding in particular and varieties, but if the public sector breeders are against you in a developing country setting or against their own local private sector, it's going to be retarded in development. It's going to be slowed down. So one thing, I'm trying to get you guys to say something about that. Already happened. That path already occurred in the U.S., if you agree with me, and comment on how you think that can play out in the rest of the world today.
I'll give a shot at that. Actually, I think that, yeah, and you're right, Rick, there was a lot of suspicion and reluctance to cooperate initially. And I think over time, that has largely gone away. Although, just in the few recent years, I think that there has been a little bit of return to that kind of attitude, which I find really disappointing in North America, or at least in the U.S. I think that the key, I want to come back to this, I think having a strong CIMMYT, which I view as kind of the Johnny Appleseed of germplasm sharing around the world, is a key, plays a key role in this. But certainly I think sharing of information and germplasm sharing, I think, is a central part of that knowledge sharing and collaboration that helped breeders work closely together in the U.S. and I think will help breeders work together internationally. And Syngenta, because of its strong European roots, has had an open pollen or an open crossing philosophy, certainly in cereals, where we have strong programs in Europe, relies on that kinds of principle, and I think that that principle has served wheat, I think, especially well. Wheat has always shared germplasm over the years, and I hope that as we move into greater technologies, that we continue that model. I think it would be I think it would be a shame if we departed from that model too divergently.
I want to just add a couple quick points to that, Rick. I think part of what we recognize also is every institution is a unique personality unto itself, and you don't always know which personalities are driving what. And some are accepting of the collaborations and the concepts, others are more reluctant, and it's going to take time to sell each of them individually. They have to be managed individually, that's very clearly. But it also, it's from our standpoint, it's we need to act as public and open and friendly as we can and continue to demonstrate and reassure folks that we can operate on that plane. It is a comfort level in these various institutions to match up with the personality needs and finally put the pieces together.
Gentlemen, other questions? Here's one. Come there next. Oh, either one. Thanks.
Thank you. I have two parts of question, both Marianne and anybody else can answer. This is related to the system of collaboration that one was saying about farmers using varieties and not coming back to the company once it is, say, on a collaboration basis. In reality, what happens, at least in developing country situation like India, I'm from India, is that the private companies, including some multinationals who are playing in Indian scenario, have not been coming back to get the nucleus seed back to the original company, innovator, to come back for higher commercial production. So it's the same thing which you are afraid of farmers not coming back to you using their own self-saved seed is being done by the companies, so which is in a way unethical. Like once we give one initial stock, it is expected as per the MOU for which they commercialized that they would come back to us for the fresh stock again so that they can raise it for higher levels and then go for the commercialization after 2 seasons. That is not happening. That's one big problem. And I have a second part of the question which is specifically to Marianne or the CG system is that when you get into collaboration with private companies in a country like India, for example, the local systems need to be recognized and the local system of order of commercialization needs to be recognized, which is use the public system. Since you are public system, you must use the public system and honor that before commercialization. Like release or the notification at the state level or the central level, both of which are existent, legally existent, should be followed before you commercialize. Hence announced that you are going to commercialize 3 varieties of wheat in India. None of these is at the moment notified. So it is, while we in public sector do that, we expect CGR to do that too. Thank you.
One challenge is not to just have one private sector there, but to have a competitive private sector there. And that's often a challenge in the developing world because market sizes are relatively small. They are geographically dispersed. And so, I mean, what we need to look at from, I think, from the public sector is really at the bigger picture of where do we want our country, our regions, the world to evolve. And things like, I mean, if we compare the maize sector with the wheat sector, to see what has been the beneficial impact of private sector maize investment into the maize sector, that we actually have achieved much higher progress than if we are in a public sector crop, not by choice. I think wheat is not by choice, it's self-pollinated crop, it is much more difficult. So I mean, I think as public sector entities, we are stewards not just of our own institution and what we want to achieve, but what the public goal and where the country wants to evolve, and the private sector is part of that. That is as well recognized by the CGIAR. If you go to the CGIAR webpage, the CGIAR is not a public sector organization. It is a public organization that works with every organization worldwide. We cannot reject. We have our agreements say if somebody comes to us and asks us for germplasm, we can not say no. Of course, you know our programs, and we know in all our programs we are working with the national partners, and we try to bring in the full range of collaborators due to their comparative advantage. And of course, we are bound by the local laws and regulations. But sometimes we have as well to see where do we come from a concept that may have been true 2 decades ago, and as well, what does the future tell us? Where should we go? And I know that in India we have seen many newspaper articles. The issue about public-private partnerships is sometimes very obvious in that discussion, for good or for bad. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenges in the wheat sector is really, and I would be keen to hear from Usha and from the other wheat seed companies, in terms of what would you need to do in order to get more viable wheat seed businesses established, and not just one, but a competitive sector? Can't that happen more without hybrid seed, or can it happen? And what measures would you want to see maybe from the public sector side? So I hand over.
To add to Marianne's point about what would it take in wheat sector, or for that matter, any other crop, I think at least in the Indian situation, a free exchange of germplasm would be a critical aspect to allow for public-private partnership, because in today's circumstances, that is a big bottleneck, which we are all struggling with, sharing germplasm, improved materials if I want to send something to CIMMYT, I really am not in a position to do so today. So that to me would be a big constraint to looking at partnerships which are public-private nature. The big challenge in wheat, of course, is that given the seed replacement rate and the farmer comes back only to buy a seed every 3 years, but we are seeing a positive trend. There's still a big market. You know, if you look at India alone and 24 million hectares of wheat, even if the farmer comes back only every 3rd year, then you have 10+ million hectares of farmer buying seed every day. So there is the market there. So if you have good material to bring that you can show the farmer something unique with your product, that really will drive the private sector in participating.
What's on that point?
It seems to me that investment in wheat, particularly from private sector, is very limited. And it may show that because hybrid wheat is not available in a commercial scale. Now, how could we change this scenario? Now today, as new genetic gains is emerging, there are a lot of new tools are being utilized. Now I think from BBSRC point of view, that the new initiative that coming up, that you would be talking tomorrow, this is probably one very nice initiative that coming up, where private and public sector would be involved and getting things moving. But one of the areas that pre-breeding, that could be one attractive area where private and public sectors could work, and where it needs investment from private sectors. I think public sectors are doing what they're doing anyway, because wheat is, or all these crops are very important for food security point of view. But I think I do not see much energy is coming up in this particular partnership. In maize, there are lots of work going on from private sectors, and in case of rice, there are a lot of things that are coming up. But in case of wheat, I wish I'm wrong, but in case of wheat, I do not see much that sort of levels of investment is coming from private sector. So how would you make a private sector get more partnership or get more interested in investing and doing more science and taking pre-breeding to the next step?
Any projection on investment from the private sector?
No, I'm not going to project investments. but I think the whole point is there has to be a return on investment to be able to reinvest back into the industry. And our biggest challenge in wheat, as you know, is about value capture. And right now, with the amount of saved seed that in most countries we're dealing with, the return on investments are not high. There's been an amazing amount of new money that's gone into wheat just in the last 4 or 5 years. Can that be sustained if we don't bring hybrids to market, if we don't bring traits to market, if we don't find new ways to capture value? I'm not so sure. So it is about value capture and value sharing and understanding that the first half of any new value is going to go to the farmer. And they have to understand that that is the commitment we're trying to make.
Just real briefly, well, Ian King talked about the organization within WISP this morning, but Kansas State University has, with the Wheat Genetics Resource Center, has established a new funding model where the National Science Foundation is contributing approximately 50% of the funding to establish pre-breeding and germplasm development. And then there are, I believe it's either 9 or 10 private sector partners that are also donating specific monies to support that activity. And so that's a joint public-private partnership that I'm, a different model slightly, but it allows both a public investment and a private investment to actually sustain a really an important activity that has long-term been very beneficial to the wheat industry and allows it to continue.
Well, this, do you want to repeat the comment?
But in Kansas, particularly Kansas State University and their wheat program is a very strong program. And for a long time, they are having good partnership with private sectors and farmers' participation, etc. That's a good model, but this good model, we wish that it should be translated to other areas and more this kind of partnership to emerge.
Okay, well, this is a topic that I know we could continue to discuss. We started a little late, but I think we've probably used up our hour. So I hope this stimulates some additional conversation through the rest of the conference. I think it's important to note, as was noted earlier, that there's been a lot of progress made in our ability to form partnerships over the last decade. We still have some work to do to bring our cultures, our working cultures together. Universities still do a lousy job of doing business occasionally, and there's still some work to do, but I think we have made a lot of progress. We do have a lot of successful models, and we're positioned to find new effective partnerships. So join me in thanking this panel, and thank you for your participation.